Hi, Blue Wire listeners. I'm Greg Olson. I'm excited to partner with Blue Wire to bring you TE1, a podcast where I interview the tight ends who have revolutionized the position. Listen in as I have raw, in-depth conversations with the all-time greats like Shannon Sharpe, Tony Gonzalez, Travis Kelce, and George Kittle. We'll explore how the tight end position has changed over the last 60 years and what it takes to be the very best. Subscribe to TE1 from Blue Wire Studios today so you're ready for the August premiere.
What is up, Hardwood Knocks listeners? I am Dan Favale coming at you with a pre-intro because this is an unscheduled soliloquy from me. I have Dakhil from Bleacher Report and The Athletic, also formerly of this podcast for our longer time listeners, coming on to talk about our biggest questions / what are we watching for with each of the NBA's Western Conference teams in the Disney campus. There are 13 teams, and we tend to go long all the time, and this ended up being a two-part podcast, even though it wasn't supposed to be. So today, you will be hearing about the first 7 teams that we're talking about. We are going in reverse record order, so we're going to cover the Phoenix Suns, San Antonio Spurs, Sacramento Kings, New Orleans Pelicans, Portland Trailblazers, Memphis Grizzlies, and Dallas Mavericks. The other 6, the Rockets, Thunder, Jazz, Nuggets, Clippers, and Lakers, will be released on Thursday. Another housekeeping note, these were recorded before Eric Gordon's injury with the Houston Rockets and before Michael Porter Jr. went all galaxy brain on Snapchat Tuesday night of the Denver Nuggets. So anything we say here was not impacted by those events. We also got updates after we recorded on Montrezl Harrell and his status about how he's not going to be playing in the opener. We do talk about him a little bit, so please keep those things in mind. But I really hope that you enjoy this podcast. It was fun talking with Mo, and without further delay, let's get into talking about these Western Conference teams. What is up, Hardwood Knocks listeners? I am Dan Favale coming at you without my fantabulous co-host Adam Frommel this time. Super pleased, though, to be joined by Dakhil. He is one of the co-hosts of the Nerder She Wrote podcast from The Athletic. He is also a writer for Bleacher Report, covers the NBA there, writes fantastic articles. He is also, I'm going to throw this on his resume here, a former official co-host of the Hardwood Knocks podcast. And he's basically coming on just to prove that we've had some lineup changes in the past few years. I just need proof that I'm not impossibly difficult to work with because he has come back. So
no, I thought I made the point when I was working with you that you were difficult to work with. I thought I was doing that.
Yes, but the fact that you've come back now is proof otherwise, which is the only reason you're here. That and to talk about what you're watching or your biggest question for all of the Western Conference teams in Disney. Really quick, follow Mo on Twitter if you have not already, at @Dakhil_NBA. That's at MODAKHIL_NBA. And last but certainly not least, shout out to our sponsors this week, betonline.ag and Deal Dash. You'll be hearing from both of them throughout this podcast. Mo, welcome back. It's been a minute. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, man, as well as we can on in the situations we're in. You'll like this, Dan. I just finished a run.
Nice.
Yeah, you always make old days of the when I was on with you. We used to make fun of me for my working out routines.
Well, you went to Orange Theory like 6 times a day or something.
Yeah, I stopped, obviously. Good luck, Orange Theory, getting me back. But yeah, no. So kind of mixing it up, getting my runs in now, and I'm doing all right.
Well, that's pretty much all anyone can say is relative to what's happening, doing well is the best response that I can hope for. So happy to hear that. Are you ready to dig into some actual hoops talks? It's been a little refreshing getting back to that part. We're having basketball. The NBA campus seems to be going fairly well. There have been some chicken wing related incidents, but who among us hasn't played them that bad?
No, I think they've done a really good job with the NBA. I'm dying to talk hoops. I mean, I've gotten to the point I'm having conversations with myself sometimes. Basketball.
Is that really new though? Oh, okay. Got it.
No. There always been other conversations, but now it's become basketball analysis with Mo, and that's just a weird scenario sometimes. But yeah, man, we're doing well. It's time to go. It's time to hoop.
Well, we're going to go in reverse record order again, like I did on the Eastern Conference pod I recorded. And that means we begin with the Phoenix Suns. What is your biggest question for them or thing that you're going to be watching throughout their time in Disney, which, let's face it, is going to be fairly brief?
Yeah, right. It's going to be about 8 games. Let's just be, and no shot against them or anything like that. It's not.
They and the Wizards shouldn't be there. That's just a fact. That's not an insult. Neither they nor the Wizards should be there.
Yeah, it is what it is, though. I mean, some of that regional network stuff and financial things that come into play with all this stuff. When I look at it with the Suns, though, in terms of what they need, this is just more reps of them playing together and playing under Monty Williams, who I think has done a phenomenal job this year in terms of building the culture and setting the culture. That's the first thing you got to do, especially in a scenario like this when it's a team that's been perennial losers, for the past, 6 years?
My math might be wrong. Kindly, yeah. It's closer to a decade, I think, at this point, basically.
I mean, yeah, since the Nash era ended. And I think this is kind of those things. And I think this is just more of the same. And you know what? Give them credit. Watching them in the scrimmages and stuff, they're competing. They're not there to take the attitude of we're just here for 8 games and we're leaving. They're coming in to play. And I think for them to get stuff out of it, I think it's just more reps under Monty's system. There are 7 of the teams that are sitting home that are probably wishing they could play. I'm pretty sure the Warriors could care less about playing at this point. But
basically Draymond Green's mindset the entire season.
No, you take your shots, man. I'm going to stay at that one there. But the Suns need these kind of reps to touch on it, and I think this has been it'll be a good thing for them overall, assuming everybody comes out healthy.
What I'm really interested to see for them is whether Mikal Bridges can be more of this offensive constant, because the dude is just a monster on defense. He's a fantastic on-ball defender. I think his wingspan is infinity. I think that's just an approximation, but it's around there.
That's a scientific measure.
Right. But if he can, and when he entered the starting lineup for good, it was right before February, he shot about 40% on threes, was scoring a little bit more. His passing on drives is sneaky good, but can he do this consistently and in higher volume? I don't think you need him to be the guy who's going to score off the dribble, but if he is willing to put the ball on the floor, if he's willing to take 3-pointers and not pass them up, I think that changes a huge part of the Suns' immediate outlook, because Ayton's made strides this year. Ricky Rubio has brought some defensive flair to their backcourt. Devin Booker is just really good still. And so they have the base of something kind of special there. And if you hit on Mikal Bridges in the sense that he's not just this defensive specialist, but he's this impact player on a possession-to-possession basis on offense, that ends up being a really huge deal for them.
Yeah, no, Bridges, I mean, it's just because we know what he brings defensively. Like you said, he's a fantastic defensive player. If he can be even more than just a 3-and-D guy, that opens the door for this team to be better next year. And it's tough. They're in the West, man. It's a brutal conference, and they're going to need him to step up. This is, again, an organization that's not always hit on their lottery picks, and this is kind of one of those scenarios where, they need Ayton to get it going. And he's looked pretty good in these scrimmages as well. He hit a couple of threes, I think, in their last one. I think, this is the kind of stuff they need these guys. They need more. The reps of it is giving them these chances, and then it allows the front office and the coaching staff to evaluate more, and give them a little bit more. Now, granted, these 8 games is going to be a small sample size, but it's important for them to kind of look into seeing hey, look, Mikal's, he's developing, he's looking better and things like that. And people shouldn't freak out if he doesn't in these 8 games, because again, it's a small sample size and it's a weird freaking scenario.
Right. And look, they're at sort of this weird point, because you don't want to end up where they're just not, maybe relative to the West, you could bottom out and try and get another high draft pick in future years, but you've already paid Devin Booker, you invested in Ricky Rubio, and you're not one of the worst teams in basketball anymore. And this offseason, you don't have any, I guess, mission critical free agents, depending on how you feel about Dario Saric or Aaron Baines. But you're getting to a point where you need to start looking at, do we consolidate some talent via trade? What are we looking to do? They could be a cap space team technically if they wanted to. Kelly Oubre Jr. is going to be a free agent in 2021. So they need to start making some kind of more, I'll say, urgent decisions with this roster following the payment of Devin Booker. And Mikal Bridges, is he a part of that? Is he not a part of that? And right now, I think you want him to be a part of that just because of what he does defensively, but you need to hit on him offensively too.
Yeah, it's critical, this whole thing, because it's just how much longer is you going to be able to keep Devin Booker there, right? Like at a certain point, if this team continues to lose, Devin Booker's too good to just be stuck there, on a losing team. At some point, and I'm not saying it's happening now. Suns fans, relax.
Right, he's under contract for 4 years. They could ride that out until the final year if they really want to. So
yeah, and at some point, if they're continuing to lose and look like they're not going anywhere for the next couple of years, you could see a scenario where Devin Booker demands a trade, and that's something that can happen. So, they need to start showing progress, not just for everybody else, but to show Booker that, like, hey, we got something building here. You want to be here for it. Trust me.
This next team, I would argue, has a much bleaker outlook than the Phoenix Suns, the San Antonio Spurs. What are you watching or asking about them, and why is it, who are they going to draft in the lottery? Because that's where they're headed.
I'm watching their young guys because it's, what do they have now? It's time for them to start. They're in rebuild mode. I think Pop has even said as much. I think it's time that they start exploring these things, and you got to start figuring out what is DeJounte Murray. I know he's coming back from an injury that he missed all last season, and we're starting to figure out who he is. Who is Lonnie Walker? What is he to them? All of these young guys that they have, Derek White, all these pieces. That's the question for them, and that's kind of what they need to find out. And even in these 8 games, again, it kind of goes back to what we said about Bridges. Just gives the organization more of a sample size in terms of figuring out who are these guys. Is Jakob Poeltl a guy that we're going to stick with for a while? And it's really hard not to call him Jacob Puddle. Shout out to the Games of Thrones guys, Game of Zones guys. Sorry. But I think that's the scenario for the Spurs there in terms of what they're going to try to get out of it, because we both know they're not making the playoffs.
Right, and that was basically mine for them too. I just more so question. I didn't even see that Pop said that they're kind of sort of rebuilding, and so that I would call that encouraging. But I want to see how much they experiment. You're talking about. I would argue DeJounte Murray and Derek White are their 2 most important, youngsters. Like, let's put youngsters in quotation marks. They've played under 200 possessions together this season. It's time to roll them out. I want to see, I feel like I don't know enough about Lonnie Walker. I feel like he has the confidence level of someone who could be a shot creator and maker on offense, but let's see more of him, and let's see more of them together. I want to see I'm putting kids in quotes, but give me Jacob Puddle, Murray, Derek White, Keldon Johnson, and Lonnie Walker on the floor together. Go really small at the 4 there. I don't care. Let's see that lineup.
Yeah, it's time for them to figure it out, in terms of, that they're in the situation that they got to assess now. They're not a free agent destination. They got to figure out, what do we have? Who do we want to keep? What can we do? Can we make moves and trades to bring in guys? Or is it time to just bottom out for the next few years and start compiling draft picks, and I think that's the scenario that they're going to be in. And they're in a tough spot, DeMar DeRozan's going to opt in. Right, right? Yeah, he'd be crazy to opt out, But now it's time to figure out, what is the market for DeMar DeRozan? What is it for LaMarcus Aldridge? If you're going to rebuild, don't half-ass the rebuild. Go be bad for a while, and that means also, and this really hurts me. This is going to be a tough one, but it might, Pop might need to ride off to the sunset, and it might be time to start making that transition. In terms of who it's going to be. At least if he's not going to retire, name the successor, so you can start sort of building it. It's almost like college programs do that, right? They always have that coach in waiting kind of thing. I think that's something that the Spurs should kind of consider. Maybe if it's somebody on their staff, or if it's, time to start looking out. But they need to start kind of planning their future here. And I think we're gonna start to see that happen with the bubble and moving forward.
And I wouldn't be so opposed to Pop not even going to the lengths of naming his successor, but if he's willing to stick around or wants to stick around, be openly willing to this is a rebuild now. And they're at this point where I won't say it's super convenient, but Rudy Gay, DeMar DeRozan, Marcus Aldridge, and Patty Mills, they're all going into the final years of their contracts. And so you're not tied down to anyone with a warring timeline for too long. I don't know what you could get for those guys. If we're talking about trades, I think Patty Mills is probably the easiest to move. But just, even if you're sort of slow playing this a little bit more until 2021, you are reaching that organic crossroads, and at the bare minimum, don't steer out of that. Like, don't try and double down and restart your postseason streak next year.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's sad to see this streak come to an end, but it was going to at some point, and I think that's the stuff. And when you talk about those guys, you can spin those guys off for draft assets, or a promising young player that you can develop. We know the organization can develop players, right? We know they can take in a guy and work on them, and work on their game and help to develop them, so they can take a project in or two, or if they're going to be a cap space team, they can swallow a bad contract, and take it and get a very valuable draft asset out of it and things like that. I think they're going to have to start thinking that way, which is something the organization hasn't had to do in 20-something years, which is absurd in its own right, in that sense. But it's time to start kind of figuring that thing out.
Yep, I'm totally with you. I would be questioning, though, whether they can actually get draft assets for a lot of those guys. Like, especially now, we don't know how NBA teams are going to feel about spending money. Like, what do you get for a LaMarcus Aldridge or a DeMar DeRozan?
Yeah, but I also think teams. I mean, I think draft assets are going to be up for sale. I don't know if you're necessarily going to get. I don't know if you're going to get high value stuff for these guys, but there are going to be some teams too that are going to be looking like, hey, this is an opportunity for us to win improve our improve our chances and raise our ceilings. I was trying to say 15 words at one time, and I think that was the hope of where you'll be able to find a way to get DeMar DeRozan off your books or LaMarcus Aldridge. It'll be interesting. And again, we have no idea what next season's going to look like. So we don't even know cap situation wise. We don't know what the season itself will look like. So who knows what going forward, what it is, but it's time for them to start, even in this uncharted territory, it's time to start planning the future.
Hardwood Knocks listeners, have you ever heard of DealDash.com? It's the best, most honest bidding site where you can win things you'd never expect at a price you'd never believe. They have over 1,000 auctions every day on electronics, appliances, beauty products, home decor, and even cars. Here's how it works. It's like an auction, but every item starts at $0 and only goes up 1 cent every time you bid. The kicker is that the auction clock restarts after just 10 seconds. That means every time you bid, everyone else has 10 seconds to answer or the item is yours. If you go ahead and buy now, DealDash is offering our listeners an extra 100 free bids upon sign up on top of their other discounts. Go to DealDash.com and use the offer code KNOX, or go to DealDash.fm/Knox. That's DealDash.fm/Knox. DealDash.fm/Knox. Next team up, the Sacramento Kings. What are you watching for them, or what's your biggest question for them in the Disney bubble, campus, whatever we want to call it?
Well, the NBA would prefer you call it campus, not bubble. Just
because it's not a bubble, but now that term is ingrained into my head because it was said so often at the beginning.
Yes, and it's just the visual of the bubble.
And the NBA mesh hat, I think, as Tom Habistro called it, it's just not as catchy, I don't think.
No, it doesn't work. I'm sorry, Tom. It just didn't get there. The way I would look at it for the Sacramento Kings is, can we make a push? Like, this is a team that was rolling, right before the shutdown. They were playing really well. They had a good situation going in terms of, Bogdanovich and De'Aaron Fox starting, and Buddy Hield coming off the bench. Now, Buddy wasn't all that excited about that, but it was working for the team, and I think it was promising for this team. And I think this is something they got to continue to roll with. I mean, they got to play with the intensity of like, hey, we have a chance to try to make the playoffs and break this streak of, what is it, like 55 years of never making the playoffs? I don't know how long it is, but
that might be. I think you're on the lower end, actually.
Oh, okay. So it's infinity years. I think they need to kind of push forward with this. Losing Marvin Bagley obviously really hurts their chances, but they got to find that synergy. Excuse me. Gosh, I can't find words.
I can never talk. So you're fine.
Yeah, they got to find that synergy amongst those three guys: De'Aaron Fox, Bogdanovich, and Buddy Hield. I think they all got to kind of find that way to work together and figure that system out, because that's a team that could be really interesting in the future. Like, that's a good young core there if Buddy can find a way to be satisfied as a six man. And one thing for Buddy Hield, because I'm sure he listens to the show, embrace the role, man. Embrace the role as the sixth man. Lou Williams, Jamal Crawford Manu Ginobili have all made tons of money and amazing careers out of being a sixth man. And this is a great opportunity for him. I think it's the perfect role for him, whether he likes it or not.
Yeah, I'm along the same lines with you. First it was going to be Marvin Bagley was what I was going to watch. So it kind of sucks that he's not there. And I'm a Bagley believer. I'm here for the Luka Doncic jokes forever. I'm here for them. But I think he can be a really good NBA player, and I get there's some mystery about what's his best position. Can he keep up with fours? Is he going to get bulldozed by fives when we're talking defense? But I think he's a better passer than he's shown. His shooting at the end of his rookie year is encouraging to me. But now for them, I just want to see if they can kind of pick up where they had left off when the season stopped. They were 13 and I think 7 over their last 20 games, and they had an offensive and defensive efficiency that ranked in the top half of the league during that stretch. They were doing a good job of forcing opponents into mid-range shots during that time. And so let's keep it up. And now that we know Richaun Holmes is going to be there, I'm just fascinated by the four of Holmes, Fox, Hield, and Barnes. That group has played only 519 possessions together, but they are destroying opponents with a 119.1 offensive rating and +6 per 100 overall. And who can you fill that out, looking at your fifth? I'd be inclined to go small, keep Barnes at the 4, go with Bogdanovich, but then what does your defense look like? Maybe Bielitsa makes more sense, but that's not really going to help your defense either.
There aren't defensive options,
right? And so that's why I like going smaller, because Hield's a pretty good rebounder. So maybe you don't get killed as hard on the glass there, but that's just what I'm looking to see. And this stuff matters just because you paid Hield. Fox is extension eligible. You paid Barnes. Now you have to worry about paying Bogdanovich in restricted free agency this year. We can't forget, particularly if you don't know what Marvin Bagley is, Richaun Holmes is going to be a free agent in 2021, and he's on a bargain contract right now. This team doesn't necessarily have to worry about coming up on the tax this summer, but they're going to be awfully close moving forward if they keep this core together. And that's why, 8 games is not a lot, but you want to see something, anything that makes you think you're headed in the right direction and that you don't necessarily need to break this up. Because I do think, depending on what they pay Bogdanovich in free agency, Buddy Hield, he's probably already there, is going to be one of the more popular, trade targets among NBA conspiracy theorists, whether or not the Kings are actually shopping him.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's going to be a big thing too. If he's not going to be happy, then they're going to have to flip him, and you're right. Like, they'll be able to get something for him. People will want him, in that scenario. So they're in that weird spot too, though. It's like, how much do you want to pay for a team that some years is going to make the playoffs and some years not, just depending on the fact that, here's the thing, and this is the truth about the Western Conference across the board. It's freaking stacked.
Next year, if you left it alone, every single team would think that they're a playoff team. I know that probably will change, but right now, if you look at it, like, what's the team that's going to be like, oh, we're punting on the playoffs?
Right. I mean, that's the thing. Like, Golden State's going to be theoretically healthy. You have the Pelicans are going to be better and hopefully have Zion for the whole year. Blazers, I think, honestly, when they're fully healthy, they're a top 5 team in the West.
Ooh.
I think that's not spicy. That's a fact. And I think, across the board, you have all of these teams that it's a challenging situation. So now organizations have to figure out, like, man, I'm going to be near the tax. And for a team that might be a 7 seed,
right.
That's a tough scenario. That's where Portland is right now. They have one of the highest payrolls, and they're in the lottery. Or right now they're in the bubble trying to get into the play-in game.
They will be up soon, though, but the New Orleans Pelicans come first. Conspiracy theorists like to say that the NBA has designed this to make sure that the Pelicans get their playoff bid over the Grizzlies. I don't think that's the case, and anyone who thought that they changed the quarantine rules for re-entering the bubble for Zion Williamson specifically, he actually just adhered to the protocol that was always in place. Whether you think that protocol is right or wrong, that's a separate matter. If you think it's wrong, I'm not going to argue with you, but they did not change anything to favor Zion Williamson. What are you watching for with them?
Zion. No, you know what? I'm watching for cohesion, of this team kind of coming together. This is a group of young guys, besides Drew Holiday and JJ Redick. I mean, look, Zion, obviously. Brandon Ingram, who's had a phenomenal year as a breakout star and has finally kind of shown what he can do. Lonzo Ball's having a hell of a year. I think, they have a couple interesting young guys in Jackson Hayes. If you want to interrupt me, go ahead and interrupt me, Dan. We have video on, and it looked like he wanted to say something. So pop in, Dan.
I was actually agreeing with you for a change because Lonzo Ball has had, to me, one of the most underrated seasons in the league this year.
Yeah, and I think, they got to kind of see what they have with these guys and how far they can roll with them, and it's cohesion. Can it come together? I mean, look, Zion's going to love playing with Lonzo because he's just going to constantly kick the ball ahead. He's never going to hold on to it. He's going to make the right passes. They have a great one-on-one player in Brandon Ingram who it's like, hey, go get us a bucket, B.I. Like, he's turning into that kind of player. He's not there yet, but he's becoming that, and that's what we're beginning to see. You got great guards and Drew Holiday, defensively. I like what Josh Hart brings to the team. JJ with his shooting. I mean, in the last scrimmage, he had a perfect third quarter with 20 points. And against the Bucks, which is, granted it's a scrimmage.
Still matters.
They were playing. Like, the Bucks were playing hard, and they couldn't stop him. Like, that's just how good JJ can get. And I think that's the kind of thing of, like, the cohesion of this team coming together. They got an easy schedule. Like, can they put this whole thing together to build forward? The one thing that kind of, as great as the net rating has been for whenever Zion's been on the court, we kind of act like the team went like 17-2 when Zion plays. They're 10-9 or 11-9 or whatever. It's 10-9 because he only played 19 games. They're one game above 500. Like, we got to see them start putting together winning ways, and that's the kind of stuff I'm going to watch for this team because it matters. Just not only just trying to make the playoffs now, but building it going forward.
And I'm very interested to see how many minutes Zion logs because they brought him along like gradually when he first came back, and you're restarting after all this time, and he did miss some time on the campus with the team. And so are they going to play him full bore like they're trying to get this playoff berth, or are we going to see him like significantly under 30 minutes per game for what's left of the regular season?
Yeah, I think that's something, I think David Griffin, the GM, said it, kind of like they're going to take it slow. I mean, they're thinking long-term with Zion, so they're not going to overextend him here. And I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't play in the opening game on Thursday. That wouldn't shock me at all, having missed a bunch of time in scrimmages. That plays a role, and you got to get him healthy and right. And we all know that's a big boy, man. And I mean that in the most positive way because he looks ripped, but that's big. And a lot of torque and a lot of like explosiveness. And it's easy to kind of overlook the fact that like you got to go slow with him to build up to that. And I think that's something that could affect their chances of making it into the play-in game.
And I'm only picking this because I figured that you would talk about Zion because that's what I'm obviously fascinated to. It's easy to forget because his rookie year has lasted roughly 2 decades. It's easy to forget that he's played in under 20 games. I'm just looking at Brandon Ingram. He's had such a great year, and I actually think he still might be a little bit undervalued in the national consensus of things. And what I was most impressed, but still am curious about, is how he plays as part of a larger team dynamic, because I think he's always shown the flashes of being able to get to his spots, create his own shots. This year, he's certainly a better finisher, and we've seen that he's improved his standstill shooting at the foul line and just from beyond the arc. I am mildly interested to see whether he can add an off-the-dribble three, but what does he look like long-term beside guys where many of them, I won't call them ball dominant, but they're going to need their touches because Zion, we know, makes quick decisions and doesn't necessarily need the ball in his hands, but you want to give him the ball. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense to have him on the court, add in Drew Holiday and add in Lonzo Ball. And that becomes a little bit combustible to me, even though the numbers are so good. And his efficiency, Brandon Ingram's, has dipped when he's playing alongside all those guys at the same time. But it's been high enough to the point where it's like, oh, this can actually really work. And I want to see more of it. I want to see if the numbers collectively support that. Maybe do we see Brandon Ingram play even better alongside those guys? Do we see them stagger him a little bit more to where he's running units, I won't say on his own, but where maybe there's only one of those three on the court? And that's just something that I've been so curious about since Zion returned, and we really haven't gotten to see how the Pelicans are going to handle it just because the sample size is so small thus far.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big question mark, but it also gives, Alvin Gentry a lot of versatility in that sense of like he has different ways to play.
He is so deep, just so deep.
And that goes to Griff putting together a really great roster in his first go around with this team. I mean, first off season, and he started to kill it. I think it comes down to, he's got to find his way to be comfortable playing with those guys and be efficient, because that's going to come down to clutch situations, right? Closing games, you're going to want Brandon Ingram on the floor with Drew Holiday, with Lonzo Ball, with Zion Williamson, and you could pick whoever you want as the fifth person. You can go small with JJ Redick, you can go bigger with Derek Favors, whatever you want. And the variety of guys they can throw out there. But in those moments, so that matters for clutch situations. Throughout the course of the game, I think we're going to see a lot of them staggering it. And at times when Zion comes off the court, you're going to see BI come on and start to kind of, all right, now we're going to start running our Brandon Ingram package and start feeding him and letting him go and get going quite a bit. So I think we're going to see more of that. And I think we have to, because that's just, they got a big question to answer here coming up. It's, his contract's coming up. He's going to be up for an extension. I think they're going to max him. I think he's a max player, but it's tough to do that, and if you don't think he's going to be efficient on his own.
Yeah. And look, his true shooting percentage with Zion on the court is 55.5. Without Zion, it's 59.7. And so it's like, again, the sample size is just relatively small, but I'm just interested to see what it looks like extrapolated. Sports are back, and so are your chances to bet on your favorite teams and events. Major League Baseball is finally kicking off, and there's no better place to start wagering than our exclusive partners, BetOnline. Check out all the odds, futures, and props to bet on, all available 24/7. And with the return of sports, BetOnline sat down with former pro players Eddie George, Harold Reynolds, and 7-time NBA champ Robert Horry. See what they had to say on what it'll be like playing without fans in a series they're calling Fandemic. Visit betonline.ag for all your odds and up-to-date sports news. Remember to use promo code BLUEWIRE, all one word, to receive your new welcome bonus. That's promo code BLUEWIRE. BetOnline, your online wagering experts. The next team up, as you already alluded to before, is the Portland Trail Blazers, who you said are basically a 5 seed at full strength. I consider that spicy. You do not. What are you watching for them? I think I can guess.
I said top 5.
So even higher.
So they could even have been higher.
Mo just picked the Blazers to win the 2021 title, just to clarify for everyone who's listening.
Sure. This is, by the way, an old Dan shtick from whenever I would do something with him on when I was part of hosting with him on Hardwood Knocks.
The only thing that wasn't exaggerated was your hate for the Timberwolves.
No, it's still pretty strong. I think the Blazers are the team that's going to make it into the bubble playoffs. I think. Oh, I'll be honest with you. Before the suspension, maybe just before Dame got hurt, because he did get hurt his groin, I think, a couple of games before the league started to suspend play. But I actually thought they were going to find a way to beat out Memphis for that 8 seed. And I just think in this scenario now, they're fully healthy. They got Yusuf Nurkic back, and he's looked great in the scrimmages. They got Zach Collins back, and he's looked really good. Slim Mello, I mean, they got a whole bunch of different things they can do. And I'm just telling you, you tell Damian Lillard, like, yo, you just need to win five out of these 3 games. I don't know if that's the proper math. First off, 5 out of these 8 games. But I don't know if that's the proper math or whatever.
Look, if you can win 5 out of 3, you're in good shape.
You're in great shape. But I think you set a target for Dame like that, and he's going to do everything he can. Like, I won't be surprised if we see a couple of 50-point games out of Dame in this scenario. I think, they're the team, I think, most poised to really kind of threaten Memphis for the bubble. And I know they have a tougher schedule. I know how all that shakes out. But I honestly think they're going to get into the playing game. And again, you just tell Dame, hey, just win twice. And I think Dame literally is just going to be like, bet, we got it. Let's go.
I am in agreement with you where Damian Lillard, if you have him, you have a chance. That's where I'll land with Damian Lillard. And I don't really have anything to add of what I'm watching. It's the return of Yusuf Nurkic and then also Zach Collins. Something that still just blows my mind is that they've, over the past 3 seasons, they've played 231 possessions together. That's it. And so there's still the element of, well, how does this work? Is Collins, he was shooting well from 3 this year, but that was across 3 games. Is he going to be able to space the floor enough? And then you said Nurkic has looked great so far, but, is that going to continue? How's he going to work? Is he still going to do well in those short rolls? How's he going to move on defense? And so that's something to watch with this team. And I do think, I guess I've always operated under the assumption that it would take Nurkic some time to get his bearings back. But if he continues to play well, I feel like that does add sort of this new layer to the competition for that 8 spot, because I do believe everyone's assumed it's going to be Pelicans versus Grizzlies. Like, that's how this shakes out. Now, if you throw the Blazers in there, it just gets that much more exciting.
Yeah, and I think people forget just how damn good Nurkic is. You know, he was the second best player for the Blazers up until he got hurt last season. You know, and he's a beast, and he provides so many different things. First off, he's solid defensively. He's a really good passer. He's an excellent screener, plays really well with Dame and CJ. Like, it just works around all around for them, you know, and I think that's why, you know, the Bosnian beast is such a big pickup for them, you know, and I think him getting this extra time to rest, get in shape, and to just hoop has mattered for him. And I think, you know, we're gonna see them. It's gonna come down to that first game of the bubble, because they played Memphis right off the bat,
right?
Which, you know, you want to talk about the NBA creating some spicy games right away. I mean, that's one of them right there. I'm going to be glued to that one.
And look, I think some people will look at the numbers, and I've seen arguments where they think that Hassan Whiteside is just better. And to me, it's just not even close, because Nurkic just provides you with so much more, both offensive and defensive optionality when you look at the way that he can move on the defensive end. And so this, to me, is actually a huge upgrade in the front court, particularly when you're just looking at, yes, Damian Lillard and Hassan Whiteside and then CJ McCollum, their chemistry is fine, but Nurkic, aside from the optionality, that's like next level chemistry.
Yeah, I mean, he fits with them perfectly. You can see the guys love him. I think they're just in a great situation there.
Next up, the current holders of the 8 spot in the Western Conference, the Memphis Grizzlies, who, as we are recording this, Ja Morant appears to be dunking all over the Miami Heat from what I've seen on Twitter. So what are you watching for with them?
I'm watching to see if they can hold on. You know, my biggest questions, you know, are shooting. Do they have enough shooting on the floor? I think they have issues in that regard. I think, you know, as good as Ja Morant has been, as good as Jaren Jackson Jr. is, I think they still have questions, you know, in terms of just a full team. And this is a young team, so it's hard to figure out how they're going to handle these 8 games, because everybody's coming after them. You know, listen, it is a lot of pressure, right? You can just feel the pressure. Portland in the first game. Do they have New Orleans on the schedule?
I thought they did, but I'll double check that while you're vamping
but I mean, you have all of this stuff. They're going to be watching the standings. You know, they're going to keep their eye on the scoreboard, you know, and things like that. Like, there's a lot of pressure that goes into how they're playing, and this is a young group, so you know, how will they handle that, you know, unique situation? And again, you know, we don't know what Justice Winslow would be with this team, you know, but him being hurt is somebody else that's outside you know, that's off the roster that they were counting on, you know, and I think that matters.
Right. And so, look, you can argue that you can't miss something you didn't have, or someone you didn't have, and yes, that's accurate, but also you gave up 2 players who were a part of your team in Solomon Hill and Jay Crowder, and then obviously Iggy was not an active member of that team, for someone. I respect the thinking there, but like, now you're missing these pieces, and maybe it doesn't matter, because now the thing without Justice Winslow there and his fit, I just want to see, you know, do they start leaning really heavily on Josh Jackson? Is Kyle Anderson going to continue to shoot as well on threes as he's been during these scrimmages? Those are all things that I'm watching, and it's like life, death, taxes. Do the Grizzlies have enough shooting on the wings? That just seems to be like the question with them. And so Winslow was a big part of that, because he's shot, it feels like he vacillates every other season. It's, good shooting season, terrible shooting season. This year seemed to be a terrible shooting season before his back stuff, but he's been hitting those catch and shoot threes. Ja Morant plays well enough off the ball where it'd be easier for them to work together than maybe it was with Winslow and Butler, because the Heat were staggering them so heavily. But now that he's gone, it's just who is stepping up in that role, or who are you leaning on more? And Josh Jackson's the one that I'm just fascinated by, because he is on sort of this redemption campaign, played so well during his time in the G League, had some pretty good moments when he's played for the Grizzlies at the pro level. And so does he become like a big member of this squad? Or do we just see a different version of Kyle Anderson? Because they need something different on the wings, and Winslow was supposed to provide that. Now that he's not there, do they even have someone on the roster who comes close to doing that?
No.
That is my question, though.
I mean, it's going to come down to like you have guys like Dylan Brooks doing things and stuff like that. But that was the one thing we saw with Justice Winslow was like he could play make a little bit, and that's how the Heat were using him, and we were beginning to see him kind of find his rhythm in that flow. And when people say like, "Hey, you can't miss what you didn't have," they were planning on having him. They were planning on it. They were game planning. Like this was part of it. When Taylor Jenkins was putting his rotations together, he was slotting certain amount of minutes for Winslow. So, it's just one of those tough situations, and a guy gets hurt and now you got to readjust. And now it's questions of, do you have enough? And I just think, as great as they've been, I think youth is going to get the best of them here, especially with the veteran Portland Trailblazers behind them.
Right, and like you said, they open up against Portland, then they play San Antonio, then they play New Orleans, then it's Utah, then it's OKC, then Toronto, then Boston, then Milwaukee. There is not a gimme game on that. And I think you can argue, maybe with the exception of the Spurs, that a lot of those teams are probably better than their records suggest. And I mean, Portland and New Orleans would be the two picks right there. Oh, the other question would be, is Brandon Clark going to continue to make more floaters than he takes? That might be the other question.
Is it a 5-3 sort of thing?
Yeah. Can Brandon Clark continue to shoot 5 of 3 from floater range every single game?
Yeah, no, I mean he's worked on it, man. Who knows, man? He's got a nice little game. So he's had a really good rookie year. So we can't. I mean, shoot, he's going to make the whole rookie team. So you just got to move forward with that.
Dallas Mavericks are next up, currently in the 7th spot. What are you watching for or asking about them?
I'm very excited to watch Luka Doncic and Kristaps Porzingis in their first playoffs. Luka's a gamer. I love Luka. I'm a big time fan of his. But I want to watch how he reacts when teams are able to sit there and game plan for his ass. For a 7-game series. Like it's different playoffs to the regular season. We coaching staffs or whatever, when it's like, hey, we get to sit down and dissect the team now. Right. It's a whole different scenario. And, there's a lot of interesting stuff in terms of they've had the historically high offensive rating, but, against the top teams, they struggle. And I think that's a situation when the defense ramps up. And I think a lot of it's going to depend on, besides those two guys, can Seth Curry continue to hit shots? Can Timothy Hardaway Jr. continue to knock down shots?
You named him.
You got to. You got to figure the whole thing out there. And I think those are guys that matter. Losing Dwight Powell hurt. Jalen Brunson, who I was a big fan of, is a
shout out Jalen Brunson.
Shout out to my guy, Jalen Brunson, who did a lot of things on the court. I think they have a nice flow with JJ Barea. He comes in and kind of changes things up. They're a really interesting team in that sense, but I just want to see how Luka and finally Porzingis, who's been in the league for like 5-6 years at this point, we get to see how he handles the playoffs. And I think this is going to be an interesting thing. And Porzingis has been fun. Sorry, this is a long-winded answer, but Porzingis, kind of started out slow, but has found his flow and his rhythm up until the suspension, and they were doing well even when Luka would go to the bench, and Porzingis would start to roam and start to hit some shots. So it'll be fun to watch them.
I'm convinced that you could give Rick Carlisle one starter and then any 4 other bench players in the league, and that lineup is going to end up being a net plus. Like the Mavericks bench-heavy units just always seem to bulldoze opponents.
I mean, hell, dude. First off, I forgot to even mention they got a great coach in Rick Carlisle, who's always underrated. Nobody really talks about him just because he always looks like Jim Carrey. It's the only reason why he gets mentioned. But I think the whole thing comes down to, can they defend? That's the other thing too, Dan. Like their wing defenders are
you have Dorian Finney-Smith, and then Delon Wright's probably their second best defender. Like Stephen Curry might be their third best defender. I'm talking wing specifically. Obviously, you have KP or Maxi Kleber up front, but that's not the best pecking order to have on the perimeter.
No, it's tough defensively, and I still think though, they have a lot of offensive firepower. Can they defend? Because things are going to slow down too in the playoffs. Their teams are going to blitz Luka. They're going to pressure the hell out of Porzingis out of the rotation. So they may not score as much. Can they get the stops they need to get? And that's really when it comes down to it for the Dallas Mavs.
And that's kind of my question for them is how far away how far away are they from contention? Or to reframe it, what do they need to place alongside Luka to get there? Because I think you can go two different ways. We just talked about kind of the shaky perimeter defense personnel, but you're talking about the pressure that defenses can put on Luka when they game plan for him. Maybe that's similar to what he's seen in crunch time this year, where the Mavericks have been terrible. They're 14-21. Their offense is 29th during those stretches, which is, look, small sample, yes, but you go from having one of the best offenses in NBA history overall to them being 29th in crunch time. Just weird. And then Luka specifically, 41.9 true shooting in crunch time, 17.1% from three. And can you create any more offensive variance to where he doesn't need to lean on his step back as much in those moments? And then maybe this is a question about Kristaps Porzingis, is can he generate his own shots, or can Tim Hardaway Jr. do that a little bit in crunch time? And I wouldn't pick KP to be that guy. That would just be me specifically. And then I don't think you're going to expect THJ to be that guy either. And I think that then has to inform how you flesh out this team moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely need the second ball handler creator. I mean, that's why that there was, early in the last offseason, there was talk of them trying to make a run at Kemba Walker, right? Like having another guy that can take pressure off Luka. And that was something, I mean, hell, Dan, this goes back to the old thing where I was like, the Bucks should look at maybe getting Chris Paul on the team. You remember that?
We were so far out in front of that. Then the rumor came out that Chris Paul preferred to be dealt to Milwaukee. Just an FYI.
Yeah, no, I know things. That's all. I know you miss me, Dan, but I know things. I just have a sixth sense for these things. But back to the
I miss you like the ocean misses water, Mo.
Wow. Oh man.
Can we just continue?
They just need that next guy, because that next guy is what kicks up Porzingis to another level. And Barea has done a good job, but he's not the guy. He's not that guy anymore. They need that second ball handler, that second creator that can create for others and themselves. And I think that's ultimately what they're missing, as well as defense on the wings.
That'll do it for this edition of the Western Conference questions for every team inside the Disney campus. We will be releasing the next episode featuring the Houston Rockets, OKC Thunder, Utah Jazz, Denver Nuggets, Los Angeles Clippers, and Los Angeles Lakers on Thursday, the opening night of this NBA regular season restart. Mo will once again be back with us, so I will talk to you all then. And until that time, shout out on Mo's behalf to Jalen Brunson.